welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are reading the Phaedo. Socrates is really setting the table for us. And himself, he's setting the table for what it would mean for him to function as the ideal hero. The last action hero in his last dialogue on planet Earth. His swan song. He outlined what it means, what swan song means for us. The greatest song that a swan sings is right before his death, because he knows he has a sense of where he's going. He has a memory of that better place where he's returning to. Equally so, Socrates has been saying he is trusting that he is going to a good place. Of course, he's been setting us puzzles to solve so that we can conclude for ourselves by matching the text that it's not thumbs up, that it's not just trust, or rather he's got a reason for trusting. Something called understanding or dianoia. Not only that, he has set us the clues to realize, hang on a second, you don't want to go to the afterlife unless you've also been initiated, calling the true practice, the proper practice of philosophy, the true mystical tradition. Which means if he's trusting that he is going to go to a better place and he is not going to end up in the mud, that he must have been initiated himself. So it's not just understanding that has led him to trust. It's also nous, or experience. The experience of death and dying, which he is calling the true practice of philosophy. However, he's adding to that where we are in the text. He's adding to that. Because we recognize the significance of trust ourselves because we matched the text. We're doing what he's asking us to do. Follow the logos. How do we follow the logos? We participate as a Sherlock Holmes, playing the best video game, playing the role of detective to discover and solve puzzles. And how do we arrange our clues? Through the dialectic. Self according to self, and then self according to another, other according to another, and other back to self, the return. 4-part structure of organizing the terms that we're discovering, called the dialectic. So we're going along with him. We're rising to the challenge. We're matching the text. We're playing our part. And in doing so, we discovered, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, trusting the logos is something we can see the significance of as a way of unifying all of the clues we're discovering about how Socrates is relating to the logos. He's calling it in. He's watching it unfold from self. He's receiving it. He has to trust it to do all of those things. Now, after we saw that, Socrates jumped in and said, hey, good work. But you can't just trust the logos. In fact, if you just trust, you are setting yourself up for the greatest defect of the soul. The greatest problem. Why? Because if we trust the logos and then someone comes along and contradicts the logos, particularly in a way that resonates with our upbringing, sounds familiar, sounds right, feels right, but contradicts the logos that we were trusting, then we'll feel betrayed. We'll have a negative feeling and we'll suffer a blow. Just as when we suffer those kind of blows let down by people, we might come to the conclusion that there is no ideal human. There is no perfect state of consciousness or healthy state of consciousness. There ain't no good humans, which is the villain origin story. There has to be a reason why the villain in narratives, in stories, in games, is acting villainously towards humans. Something has caused his lack of empathy or his active animosity, hatred towards humans. And Socrates says, just as that is in mythology or storytelling, so too is the cause of the greatest defect of the soul, but not a hatred of humans after trusting something and then being let down or betrayed or seeing it's not trustworthy, but to the logos, trusting the logos and then being convinced that it's not trustworthy. The logos. So humans is to the logos is the analogy. We don't want that greatest defect. And we are reflecting on why that could be the case. And we are seeing that the logos and the structure of the dialectic gives us what we need to reach our destiny and remove our problems, escape our fate, and reach our most meaningful goals. Fate and destiny. Purification and perfection are the two terms that Socrates has been using. But he also said, what happens is you will spend the rest of your life hating and reviling the logos, and you will end up being deprived of the truth of beings and knowledge. And Socrates has been pointing out that's why we do what we do. That's why we love learning, because we want to reach the truth of being and knowledge. So now we have a little bit more of what is philosophy. It's a trust based on understanding dianoia, which involves the logos and dialectic, verified in your experience. That experience is called nous, but it's also a separation of the soul from the body. When you can bring understanding and your virtue practice to that, you can upgrade the virtues, trade it in for the gold coin of phronesis. And it's the love of phronesis and the desire for the truth of being that we are philosophers. That's our purpose. We begin as a lover of learning, philomathesis. We realize that our learning needs to be directed towards being, making us a lover of wisdom, logos directed towards being. The virtue of that is to do it at all times, use it for your planning. And then philomathesis goes to philosophia, and then philophronesis. And we have to trust and follow the logos. And we actually saw ourselves that this is what makes the virtues, and it's the lack of the logos that makes the vices. And now Socrates had just added to that the art of the logos. It's not just the trust based on your dianoia and nous. You have to apply an art. So the cause of villainy is to be let down by humans and come to the conclusions that there is no health and excellence in the human psyche. And within the individual, for us spiritually, for our purpose, that is a metaphor for the logos. To trust the logos without your art, to be able to judge whether or not it's trustworthy for yourself, not belief, not just trusting based on belief, trusting based on an art. And if the villains had the art, they wouldn't become villains. They would be able to judge where a human is at using the art of the logos. Where are you at and where are you stuck? And so too, we must use it for the arguments themselves, for the logos themselves. We can't just trust Socrates. we have to ourselves be applying the art of the logos to understand or know? That's the question. What's involved in the art? Judgment is part of it. Judgment between extremes is part of it. But that's our question. What is the art? Because Socrates is saying, if I can't pass on the art of the logos to you, then I am not being the ideal hero. Because this is what happens if you just trust me without the art of the logos yourself. Already I've given you several arguments about the immortality of the soul, but then the logos of Simmias and Cebes, their counter-arguments, sounded convincing enough that it's put you all in a tailspin. I can't leave you like this. Because this keeps happening, all of my good arguments would be countered by people who are very good at the anti-logos, contradicting the logos, and eventually you people who have spent your life learning from Socrates might end up hating and reviling the logos and thus be deprived of the truth of being and knowledge. So it's really setting the bar high. Not only do I have to define and demonstrate the art, first two categories of the dialectic, I need to give you I need to give you the material for you to participate too, so you can learn the art. The division, all of the parts, so that you can unify those parts into a whole synthesis and understand the art of the logos analysis for yourself. Division and synthesis analysis are the second half of the dialectic. So if the dialectic means a connection, a rubbing together of two sticks, a relationship between two ideas, self and other, we also see within the structure, those four parts can be broken down into another pair, another two. So we can add that to our skill tree. As we go, we're developing our skill tree, and we've already seen a four skill tree with the dialectic: definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, analysis, self to self, self to others, others to others, others to self. So there's a four, but if there's a back and forth within the text, Socrates doing the first two and we have to do the second two, then we can take this four skill tree way of understanding the dialectic and understand it even more simply. There's actually a dialectic within the dialectic, which means we have to match Socrates. He's not just setting the bar high for him to define the art of the logos, demonstrate the art of the logos, but do it in a way through certain kind of division into its parts so that we can unify it and understand it ourselves, so he can pass on the art of the logos, because he can't be around to save the day forever. So that's the standard. Imagine that. The standard of our heroes is just demonstration. Superman doesn't have to define what justice is, he just has to demonstrate it somehow. In fact, that's the nature of a lot of his conflict within stories about Superman. He often he's called the Boy Scout. He just follows orders. He doesn't know how to define justice. He struggles with that. So Socrates is already better than Superman, but he has to go even further. He has to pass on his ability, which isn't as cut and dry as just telling people. You have to create the conditions for their understanding. So the bar is high for him. But because we have to match him, we are engaged in a dialectic with Socrates ourselves together in this channel. The bar is high for us too. So we have a hero story greater than Superman. In fact, if we can recognize the dialectic in this paradigm or principle for this hero's journey, hero's story, then we might even say, by definition, it's the greatest hero. It's the ideal hero. And if it's following the universal paradigm, it will always be the ideal hero story. So it's a kind of learning we can take with us wherever we go in our next incarnation. So not only is it very cool to see this as the greatest hero story, greater than Superman and Batman, but if we learn about it, it is a kind of learning we can take with us beyond this life. So it's a kind of learning that we might be here for. Because if we're here for a reason, then rationally speaking, we can't take our material things with us. That's the lowest part of the soul, our desire. The middle part of our soul seeks fame or honor. We can't take our honors with us. And the highest part of the soul, our reasoning part. Philomathesis, lover of learning. Possibly we could take our learning with us. That's the only thing rationally we could take with us. So if we are here for a reason, it must be some kind of learning. And it must also be a kind of learning that can go beyond this lifetime into our incarnations and positively affect our incarnations. Last time we went back to the beginning and we saw one of the very first things Phaedo recounted about Socrates is that he was like a good daemon, but he would fare well in the next life. He would do well. He's done something in this lifetime that is going to make his journey into the next place fare well. He's going to do well there. That's what we want. And also receive divine providence. That's also what we want. Not only do we want to do well, we want to have the best master. And one of the things Socrates said is, I'm going to a place with greater masters and friends and humans. So there's our divine providence, the greatest master, and how well we can fare with our friends. So a kind of learning that can give us that kind of benefit in the next life must, rationally speaking, be what we're here for. And the Greek word for that is paideia, kind of spiritual learning that can affect us and allow us to benefit, fare well, and be in connection with divine guidance, providence in our next life, paideia. So that was the opening. There's a reason why it's in the opening. It's setting the scene, setting the table, creating a promise. We want to say, hang on a second, we're also going to die. We're also here for a short amount of time, relative to eternity, of course. So how can we fare well in our next life? How can we be connected to divine providence? And recently he said, by the way, if you do not become a lover of learning and then a lover of philosophy and then a lover of phronesis, you're going to end up being a lover of the body. That's side B of the dialectic, if philosophy isn't. And that's going to be one or both of lover of riches or lover of fame. But if you pursue that life, you're going to be nailing the soul to the body. You're going to be self-imprisoning yourself. And that's going to affect your incarnations negatively. You're going to come back as a donkey or a bee or a hawk or something like that. We don't want to just settle for that. We want to remember and keep remembering and keep evolving, go to a better place, level up, or evolve spiritually, just like represented in the metaphor in society with heroes and villains. We want to evolve within humanity, evolve out of our attachment to our false beliefs that cause our fate, right? People 50 years ago can predict the very predicament we're in now, suffering from inevitable, almost extinction, destruction of the planet, extreme wealth inequality, extreme poverty, oppression, genocide. Yeah, of course people could predict it 50 years ago. That's what fate does. It doesn't cycle upwards, it stagnates. It's a stagnated ousia, repeating cycles of failure that's very predictable because it doesn't go anywhere. That's fate. So within humanity, we want to escape our fate and cycle upwards to our highest goals. That's evolution. So that's within the physical world, but that is a metaphor also for what's most important within ourselves. We want to escape our fate, our problems, and evolve spiritually in this life and in the next. That's philosophy. Because this art and practice of death and dying we do here. And when we have our last death. Therefore, some sort of learning that will allow us to do that must be what we're here for. Paideia. The learning we can take with us. So, if we can see that this is a universal truth, a paradigm for what would make this hero greater than Superman, and we don't just trust that it is, because it's Socrates and it's his swan song, as he's saying, but we can understand it through an art, then it could be a paradigm for us, a model for us, for our excellence, and also a learning that we can take with us wherever we go in our next incarnation, because it's universally true. And that's what we're interested in philosophy, the truth, not opinions. So we want to define the ideal hero, but not just define it. We would have to also demonstrate it. That's part of philosophy. Definition and demonstration. Where are my balloons? They should be balloons. There we go. So we have to meet Socrates where he's at. And this is reading, by the way. If we can read without interpretation, which is why we read it carefully, we go over it, we look at the specific words. Specifically, if a passage hangs on a key word, we look it up. If we read without interpretation, we are matching the level of where the author is at, where you're at and where you stuck. Well, where's the author at? What level of mind is Socrates at, or Plato? I'd like to think that it's not just Plato. This is actually something Socrates did. So we have to match the mind of Socrates in reading without interpretation. The same thing applies in dream analysis. When you can understand your dreams, you're required to match the level of insight of the dreams themselves. Dream analysis, not dream interpretation. And I'm looking for a way of engaging in dream analysis with people if they're interested. I'm trying to find a way of facilitating that, maybe through Patreon. But yeah, if you're interested in that, send me a message and we can arrange something. Which is what? Applying this level of reading without interpretation through the universal structure of the Logos and Dialectic to understand dianoia and experience, ideally, nous. The messages we get from our dreams, which is, therefore, a divine providence. If the Logos is being generated and created by a higher intelligence through our dreams, that's the divine providence that Socrates is talking about. And in the Phaedo, he starts the whole thing by saying, I'm following the instruction of my dreams. Dream said make music, I'm going to do it. We too can share in that divine providence and guidance through dream analysis. And if you're interested, I'll reach out and we'll find a way of setting something up. So, we have to define what this ideal hero is and also demonstrate it ourselves. So we're matching Socrates. We're meeting him where he's at. Reading without interpretation. So therefore, we are also accepting the hero's quest. So, High bar for Socrates, what is it? The art of the logos. And a high bar for us, what do we have to do? Match it. Figure it out and demonstrate it by doing the dialectic that he's been sprinkling clues about all the way through this text. So that's where we are. That's the stakes. Art of the logos. This is the first time he brought up the art of the logos. That, hey, this is where villains become villains, and this is what I have to do to be a hero and also pass on to be the ideal hero. So let's jump back into the text and see if he can do it, and let's see if we can match it. Sound exciting? I think so. What do you think, Owen?
Wow.
Let's jump in. So let's read this last section. Socrates, just to repeat it so we have it ourselves. So here we go. This is Socrates. This is his last section that we read. He's pointing out, by the way, we're talking about heroes, and he's talking about Hercules and Iolaus. Iolaus of being the assistant to Hercules. He's saying, hey, we have to take up arms and vanquish the logos of Simius and Cebes, the feeling convincing that our soul is not immortal. And that's going to make us Hercules, which is what? One of the greatest heroes. So even he's giving us clues. So it's good that we are thinking about Socrates as the ideal hero. But he said, no, not just me, but you too. Think of me as Iolaus, Hercules' assistant. You do it. You become a hero. And then Phaedo says, okay, I will call on you as the greatest hero, but not as Hercules, but Iolaus. And Socrates says, it makes no discernible difference, which was a question. So maybe now we have an answer or a hypothesis that we can take with us, a possible if, of why he says it makes no discernible difference. If we are matching him, then we'll be at the same level, won't we? We will each be ideal heroes. So it doesn't matter who's Hercules, who's Iolaus, doesn't make a difference. But we should guard against a certain mental condition. Our author recognizes it as the pathologos, which is a certain word, the sick logos, not just an anti-logos, but a certain fundamental false belief about the self and the nature of reality. That is the cause of our repeating cycles of problems, of our fate. The puzzle, one of the two puzzles we're here to overcome, our pathologos and the nature of the self. So we have to take care to guard against a certain mental condition, that we not be affected by it. And of course, that's what we do when we do the logos, when we do philosophy. We hope that our pathologos doesn't jump in to derail us. If we do, we want to address it fairly or take notes about it, put it aside so we can go back to it later in dream analysis or applying the dialectic to understand our problem. That's called philosophical midwifery. We put it aside for a while with a promise to return to it so that we can get back on the logos train. So we don't want to be affected by it while we're following the logos. What's that condition? Hater of the logos. We should not become haters of the logos. Just as, metaphor, people become haters of humans, for there is no greater defect that one can suffer than to hate the logos. But hatred of logos and hatred of humans arise out of the same condition. For hatred of humans is either put on out of excessive trust in someone without the use of the art, and by being led to believe the man, a man is analogy to logos, the man is altogether truthful and sound and trustworthy, then a short time afterwards discovers this person is base and untrustworthy. The old idea of not base as in bad. And then after this experience another one also happens, and when one has this feeling many times, imagine that being let down or betrayed or suffered an injustice of some kind. After you feel that many times, especially by those who you were led to believe, notice belief. So whatever this art is, it's not to do with belief, or not just belief at least. Led to believe they are their nearest and dearest friends. In the end, after many such blows, he hates everyone. And he creates an apocalyptic weapon to blow up the world in our stories. Like Lex Luthor and so on. Hates everyone and is led to believe that perfect wholesomeness of mind, so sanity, does not exist in anyone. So this is the ideal, this word here, parapan, beyond the greatest, and this is health or soundness of mind. Does not exist in anyone. Have you seen this before, Phaedo? Many times indeed. Socrates continues, is it not the case then that this is a disgraceful mental condition, and clearly due to an attempt to have human relations without making use of an art in human affairs? Who are you talking with? Who are you relating to? Who do you date? For if he had made use of an art to any degree, he would it would have led him to believe. So here is a different belief. So he's led to believe here, and now he's also the same word we can see in the Greek, led to believe, but from an art, just as it has to be in this way. The very useful and the very useless are very rare. The majority are between those extremes. What do you mean, Socrates? It is just as with the very short and the very tall. Do you think anything is more rare than it is to find an extremely tall or extremely short man or dog or anything else?
Meow.
Or again, one extremely swift or slow or deformed or well-formed or white or black? Or do you not perceive that in all of those cases, on the one hand, the most extreme at either end are rare and few, but on the other hand, the abundant and plentiful are between those? Most certainly, says Phaedo. Notice, interestingly, he's talking to Phaedo. Previously, he's been talking, our narrator. Previously, he's been talking to Simmias and Zebes. So this is a change in the text. We're about near halfway, around halfway, maybe a little over halfway. I wonder if that's significant. The golden ratio is a bit over halfway. I don't know if we're exactly at that, but maybe. Here we go. So, very few is reasonable, is likely. It is reasonable, but the logos on the one hand, says Socrates, are not like human beings in this way. I was just following your lead. But that sick condition happens whenever one puts their trust in some logos as being true, not a person, the logos, without the use of the art of the logos. There's our dramatic sting. Then shortly afterwards believes self to be false. Okay, now of course this is the word self, alto in the Greek. And there's the three readings, the triad reading, that reflects our self triad. So let's go to our skill trees. Where are all our triads? Where are all our triangles? Here we go. There's a bunch of them here. Of course, they're everywhere. So where's one that has the... Here we go. Okay, this is the excellence triad, the one self, the ultimate goal, self, mind, or being, the level of being that we want to reach, that we have knowledge of, and the logos, our understanding that gets us there. But that also is reflected in, let's add one more triad. Look at all the triads we have. Do we have one to do with levels of reality? I don't see it there, so let's add it. Being, power, activity. These are our virtues. Let's add another triad. So this one here in particular is really nice because it reflects, you don't see it, so let's add it. The one self, of course. Level of being and level of becoming. This is the physical world, or we can say physical realm and the metaphysical realm. Okay, let's make it into a triangle. So one of the reasons why we're developing triads in our skill tree when we go is you can rub them together. When you notice that you can overlay some of them, you can gain insights about one by overlaying it with another. For example, right here we've got this is a triad representing the levels of reality. The physical world where we start and hopefully we become a lover of learning for Phronesis, and then we realize we need to direct our attention to that which is eternal and pure and immortal, that which is knowable, mind itself. That makes us a lover of wisdom, philosophia. But even there, we want to integrate both together. This is that line, the bottom two terms of the triangle, to develop a virtue called Phronesis and apply that to go beyond even the highest experience, beyond even eternity, to the cause, or that which is experiencing eternity, or the cause of eternity, the one self. So that's the highest, within philosophy, that's the highest realm. Now, one of the natures of a triad is that these two bottom ones have a hyparxis. So if you're looking at the virtues, temperance and courage, you need to use them both and apply them to wisdom. So that's why the wisdom is up here. And even though this one is like the bottom, and this is the second, and this is the top, so there's a 3-2-1 ordering. And another way of the 3 and 2 work together. So there's a triad. Here we go. In philosophy, we have Apollo, the god of music, which is the god of this text. We began by saying we're going to, there's a celebration for a purification celebration of Apollo. Socrates says his dreams have been telling him to make music, and philosophy is the greatest music, but he's also going to make regular music as well. That's Apollo, represents philosophy. When we apply it, we're not just defining it, but when we can demonstrate it, we can see how everything fits together in a beautiful way. That's interesting, that's engaging, that's insightful. Also, it makes philosophy not dry and academic. It makes it significant to us. It breathes life into it. So this is a kind of activity. This is, so we can overlay this triangle here. This one, this is kind of a archetypal activity, power, and being. This kind of, you'll see this in all of the triangles. So you can overlay them, so we can recognize, oh, hang on, we can overlay that triangle and to understand this triangle. So Apollo is a kind of activity that we're doing here right now. The power we get is when we gain these insights, when we recognize it's beautiful, that will inspire us, that will motivate us. give us a reason to do this. We want to do it because it's beautiful to us. And when we start learning the logos, applying it, definition and demonstration, it leads to Hermes. And what does Hermes represent for Plato? Dialectic. Dialectic is the highest or the fullest flowering or the hyparxis. These two together lead into that one. So that's something of the nature of the triangle. That's something that is the quality of these triangles. But also we have, we just did one to do with realms of reality. Here, the physical realm of becoming, the metaphysical world of pure being, and the one self. Actually, being and the one self are also on the self triad. The one self is the same. Self being or self mind, has this term here. So what's the significance of that? If you see two, that's enough for a pattern, which means you can gain an insight about the third. This is called abduction, by the way. You know, some of here, some of here. This is reasoning from analogy. If a king is like a shepherd, just as his people is like sheep. By the way, I'm also going to mention the palace. Oh, hang on a second. There must be a term like the palace for the shepherd. His tent. This is how puzzles are given to us. In everything, you're playing a video game, you'll notice, oh, this painting has 2 gems in the eyes of the face. Oh, there's another painting that also has 2 gems in the eyes of the face. Pattern has been established. This third painting is missing the gems. Maybe I have to find these gems and put them into the eyes in this painting, and that will unlock a passageway. So this triangle is like the gems. This painting has 2 gems. This painting has 2 gems. Here is a painting missing this term here. You've got to fill it in. This is the archetype for setting up puzzles. Now, we have a ton of them because look at all the triads we've developed as we've gone through this game. Heaps. So we recognize the excellence triads. The one self matches the level of reality of the one self. Self-being or mind matches the metaphysical realm of being. Therefore, in this physical world, maybe the excellence that we can do, the excellence triad, in this realm of becoming is the self-logos. We solved a puzzle. Now we push the implications. That would mean whenever we're in our physical body, we should be engaging in self-logos. That would be an excellence. This is the self-logos, is the highest excellence we can have while in our body. Now let's bring in some other triads. What about that archetypal one? Oh, so this self-logos triad is on here. Activity, interesting. So we can put all 3 of them together. While we're in the physical world of becoming, let's get rid of all these lines. While we're in the physical world of becoming, we can do the greatest activity. That would be the self-logos. Wow, we can rub multiple. This is why it's a skill tree. Like when you're playing a video game, you level up this skill, you can add it to this skill, and you can create a even better skill, add them together. What else can we add? Oh, we talked about Apollo before. Oh, Apollo. That's the same part of the triangle. So can we bring them all together? While we're in the physical world of becoming, the greatest thing we can do is an activity. The art of the self-logos which is where we are in the text, by the way. That's pretty cool. Clap for that. And by the way, learning the art of the self logos, you can understand as Apollo or philosophy. The art of the logos is one way of understanding the nature of philosophy. So we're understanding our purpose by taking what we've learned. Number one, the key terms. They all have key terms. And number two, structure. They've been organized within this structure so that we can put them all together and come to insights. By the way, creating the terms and the structure, that's Apollo. Rubbing them together to get insights, that's Aphrodite. What are we practicing? Hermes, the dialectic. We're doing it. So, by the way, in doing it, we upgrade our own seeing, which allows us to relate to the text in a higher way, because we've just been reading. The stakes of this drama is that Socrates has saying, hey, whether you have become a villain and hate humans, or the greatest defect, the pathologos, where you hate the logos, that comes from not having the art of the logos. So the greatest stakes were the art of the logos, and now we can see something about that ourselves, something extra, because we've just seen, by taking our triads and rubbing them together, that what we should be doing in the physical world is the self-logos. That makes sense of what Socrates just said. Socrates is saying, hey, if you don't have that, so we're doing the positive. Socrates is giving us the negative, which gives us something to do, which is positive. Just like in a game, the video game gives you the painting, which with two holes in the eyes of the face. So there's nothing there, it's negative. You have to find the gems and you have to put them in. You have to make it positive. Socrates does that a lot in his, because that's part of what we're seeing as the ideal hero. Not just being able to define and demonstrate it, but to give puzzles and tasks for others to participate in, division, find the terms and arrange them in a structure so that they can synthesize and analyze and participate too. That's our whole thesis for today. Within the 4 parts of the dialectic, there is another dialectic. He does 1 and 2, definition, demonstration. We have to do 3 and 4. Division, find how it's divided into terms and structures, put it all together in the division stage, and come to a conclusion. That's synthesis and analysis. Make it our own. So he has to pass on the tradition. That's part of it. We don't want it to die with Socrates. Just like a great hero will be able to define what he's doing and demonstrate himself as a great hero, but pass on his ability. But also we've noticed that it spirals up. It's not stagnant. Every time it's passed on, the quirk or the skill or the art is improved. We're evolving up. And of course, because if he was just passing it on, that's fine. That's better than Superman. But you could make it even more perfect if you say in the act of passing it on, it's improved in some way. Makes it more ideal. So we're understanding why it's the case. So he's giving us the negative. Hey, if you don't have the art of the logos, you could end up being trusting people you shouldn't, and end up thinking there's no excellence of humanity. That can be depressing, or you can become a villain or a tyrant. Lose your empathy for humans. Not recognize the divine and noble nature of all humans. That everybody is here for a reason, somewhere between our problem and our excellence. The ladder up and the shadow. Virtue and vice. Somewhere in between. And for our soul, likewise, if you don't have the art of the logos, there's the negative. You can end up hating the logos. That's the worst condition, pathologos, hating the logos. So that's the negative. We are seeing the positive because we're playing the game. We've done some work. We've got this work with us. So the positive is, the excellence in the realm of being, the realm of humans, the realm of becoming, becoming the physical realm that we see through our senses. The excellence is the self-logos. If we take excellence and self-logos, we can call it the art. What's the art of the self-logos? It's a kind of activity to do with Apollo philosophy. Interesting. So we're adding the positives. We're playing the game. The sick condition happens whenever anyone puts their trust in the logos as being true without the use of the art of the logos. Then shortly after believes, and we were talking about this because of self. So self, the word self means this triad. This is one of the significance that we can awaken philosophy, we can awaken the hero's journey, we can awaken the tradition of Socrates and the art of the logos now because we have this translation that actually adds the word altos as self. Because, notice, the levels of excellences are self-logos. The word self is there. We're learning the self-logos. It's our language. It's within us somewhere. We have to uncover it, awaken it. The level of being that we experience it by uniting with it, becoming uniform. Therefore, it's our self-mind. People who experience the light of being and however they get there, one of the things they talk about is, I recognized it. It was me. And it was so obvious. It's always been me. I couldn't believe I had forgotten. I was wrapped up in the physical world and all the dramas. A very common way of talking about that experience. It's self-mind. Word self. And the ultimate is the one self. What's experiencing this? Or what's the cause? What's the first cause? And if it's our final goal, our destiny, then it's called the first and final cause. That's its name. Notice the word self is in all three. The word self has that meaning. Altos in the Greek. So also you can read it, and we can match these together. You can read it as the particular. The physical world, you see particulars. You could read it as the honorific. So often in Homer, he would talk about Achilles having the self-shield, the greatest shield. Honorific means the excellence, or a self-er term, self-justice, the highest justice in being. Not a justice, a particular. So the self-er terms have a noun sense in the realm of being, beauty itself as a noun, but we see it in the physical world as particulars, a. So the or self in the realm of being, self-beauty or the beautiful, and we see them as adjectives in the physical world, a beautiful dog, a beautiful person, which is why loving and learning, look at all these beautiful things. For them to be beautiful, where did beauty come from? This is what we've seen already as the teaching that all learning is remembering. Where did beauty come from? That person looked beautiful, but when they came closer, they're ugly. Where did I get this idea of beautiful from? It can't have been from the physical thing. So a lover of learning becomes a lover of wisdom. Directing the logos to being. Directing the logos to being. And of course, we've talked about how, hey, if you can unite these two bottom terms, if you can unite philosophy with the beauty of the insights that you're gaining by applying it, then those two together lead you to the dialectic, mastering the dialectic, the hyparxis, the top of the pyramid. So we can take that with us and come to a conclusion. Hey, if we master the art of self-logos and we apply it to being, or use it while we're in being, even better, either or, then we have a way of unifying those two, which is a way of reaching the hyparxis. Maybe if we apply our art of the self-logos to the realm of being, we can, just as we saw, for there to be a beautiful thing or a just action or a good sandwich, many examples, there must be the ideal. So too, if there is self-beauty, self-justice, self-excellence, many examples of self things, honorifics, can we apply that same paradigm, the learning here, the learning in the realm of becoming, apply it to the higher level, that's called anagogic, applying what you've seen in one level to the higher, that's anagogic movement. Apply what you learn about how a sheep cares for his, how a shepherd cares for his sheep, apply that to how a king cares for his people, you're moving up a level. So if we can apply this kind of learning that takes us from the realm of becoming to the realm of being, from the self-logos to self-being, we can take that learning with us here, and maybe we have a way of reaching our destiny, the hyparxis. Apply it here. Well, maybe there's something that, just as there was a cause for all of these beautiful things, maybe there's a cause even for beauty itself. This is the kind of thing that we can see because we have all these lovely triads, which are what? Structure. Which include what? Terms. So the word altos has all three. Has the A, meaning, has the honorific, the ideal, and also has the meaning of the one self. So when we read it in the text, because we have a translation which has the word text, he says, okay, so what happens? The sick condition happens whenever anyone puts trust in some logos as being true without the use of the art of the logos.
Come on, man.
And shortly after believes self to be false. Okay, now here's a little, what's the word? Not life hack, not cheat code, tool that you can use. Try it, play with it, have fun with it, try it out. If you recognize that the word alto here, self here, has those levels that we mentioned, A for the self logos, the ideal or honorific to do with being, and maybe even the one self, the self, then when you see it in the text, try all three. When you're given an option of 2, take both. If you're given an option of 3, try all 3. See if that affects your reading. Let's try it now. Because that might be a way that Socrates hides questions for us to solve. Christopher Nolan does that in some of his movies, by the way. He will not just Chris. There are a few actually that I've seen, film directors who have like a main puzzle, like the obvious narrative that any moviegoer will see, and there'll be a puzzle that the main character has to solve in a certain way, and he solves it in a certain way, and then there'll be a hidden question that only those who are paying attention to Inception or Fight Club or something like that, or Tenet, there's a hidden question that you will only get if you sort of raise your mind to meet the director. Now what's curious is, once you've seen that question, you're left with the puzzle, well, how do I solve that question? That wasn't in the story. The main character was solving the other question, the obvious one. So what do I do with this question? Here's a tip. Use the theme of the way the main character solved the first question as a guide. Try and apply that analogically to your question, the hidden question. See if it fits. That's a bit of a tip. Now, we're doing that same analogical thinking here. Let's see if it fits. Let's try all three levels of reading. See if one can help us inform the other. Let's go. So, if you trust in the logos without the art of the logos, you'd be, shortly after believe self to be false. What's the first reading? The particular of the sentence. It. So you'll believe it to be false. That makes sense. That one usually always makes sense, by the way. So if you trust in some logos without the art of the logos, you'll shortly afterwards believe it to be false. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. You believe something and then you'll believe it to be false. Now let's take honorific. So you have a trust in some logos as being true without the use of the art of the logos, then shortly after believe the honorific self to be false. Oh, not the particular logos that you once believed to be true and now you believe it to be false, but logos itself. Maybe that reading fits the honorific. Shortly afterwards, you believe the self logos to be false. Could that be a danger for a philosopher who is following the self logos? Now let's try the third term, so we've got the particular, the honorific, and the ultimate. In fact, we could make that a triad. That's a cool way of thinking about these triads. So we've got the excellence, the particular realm, the realm of becoming, the honorific, the realm of being, and the ultimate, our ultimate destiny, ultimate realm. So do we have ultimate anywhere here? Okay, let's make some space for it. No. Oh, by the way, here's our lover of learning, lover of wisdom, and lover of phronesis that Socrates has mentioned. Could that apply? Are you a lover of learning in the physical world? Are you a lover of wisdom in the realm of being? Is phronesis something to do with the self, the oneself? Puzzle, hypothesis. Carry it with you. You don't have to be right or wrong yet. Just carry it with you. So, we are saying, okay, here's another way of understanding these triads. Let's go green. We have the particular. And in the text, you can read it as it. We have the ideal or honorific. Honorific. Or the ideal. Or the idea in Greek. Or excellence. And we have the ultimate. This is a fun way of understanding the three uses of altos, but also this. What is the particular realm? That's our physical realm. That's where we wake up as babies and hopefully become a lover of learning. What's the ideal learning? Oh, if you really, the ideal of learning, you're learning about the realm of being. That's philosophy. Also spirituality, true spirituality, Socrates is saying, actual mysticism. What's the ultimate thing you can learn about? The oneself. And that's the first hypothesis of Parmenides, by the way, and we have a whole read-along on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out and read along. The first hypothesis of Parmenides. When Socrates first got into philosophy, his teacher was Parmenides. Parmenides was 60, Socrates was 19. And when he says, by the way, Socrates, for you to get into philosophy, you have to learn the dialectic and practice it on all of the different things in being. Justice, beauty, goodness, all of the things, all of the aspects of being. Learn the dialectic. That's what Zeno was Parmenides' student. He was about 40. So we've got a triad of Parmenides, Zeno, and Socrates. By the way, interesting. The narrative or the mythology reflects the philosophy. That's cool. Definition and demonstration. So you got to do that. And by the way, Socrates says, oh, yeah, that's very interesting. It's very complicated, this dialectic thing you speak of. I don't quite understand it. Can you give me an example? And Socrates was really sneaky.
Sneaky little bitches.
And he said, can you use as your example of the dialectic, Parmenides? Not beauty, not justice, not anything here. The self. There was a reason why Parmenides thought Socrates had a divine spark for the logos within him. So that was the first. So he did the first hypothesis, which was a dialectic on the oneself, the ultimate. That's the first hypothesis of Parmenides. And of course, he didn't stop there. He went on to do a dialectic on the realm of being. In fact, he did the ultimate, and then he did 4 if reality is, and of course, is refers to existence, the eternal immortal being, and 4 if it isn't. And we can recognize, oh, that's a dialectic. If beauty is, there are 4 categories: definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, analysis. But then you have to also do, side B. What if beauty doesn't exist? What if justice doesn't exist? And mythology. What if Spider-Man was bitten by a spider and got superpowers? And what if he didn't? You have to do 2 episodes or 2 what if comic books. So it's curious that he gave this first hypothesis and then 4 if it is and 4 if it isn't. So this is a dialectic on the one that is, including an ultimate one that sits above the 8-part structure of the dialectic, which is curious. So you feel free to go back into that playlist and check that out if you're interested. So we're doing this, we're applying it to the text. So the particular, it, honorific, the ideal, and the ultimate. It may not fit, but if you practice this, you might unlock a higher reading. Be careful when you share it though. I've studied with Dr. Pierre Grimes, who was a very Socrates-like figure who took on the art of the logos and improved it. And when he started changing it from it to the ideal, depending on where somebody was at, where they're at, and where they're stuck, the logos ladder and its shadow of the logos, and Socrates saying, hey, these are rare. Someone who's doesn't have a problem and is just climbing this ladder, that's rare. And someone who's only in their problem and is not somewhere along this ladder, that's also exceptional. That's the art of the logos, by the way. You got to judge people are between here as part of being human. Everyone gets a problem. Everyone has a quest. Well, two questions. Question about their problem, question about their ideal. That's being human. There's no blame for having a problem, ever. That's irrational. So based on where the people were at when Pierre would shift from the particular to the ideal, oh, did he mean the honorific? And some people would get up in arms. What? That doesn't make sense. It's just it there. Only it fits. Some people liked it. In fact, what's interesting is over the 20 years when Pierre was doing that, I was studying with him. When Pierre was doing it, sometimes people would change. They would only accept the particular because the particular would read more fluently. Like we talked about Christopher Nolan and other directors like that. Everyone can read the particular. Everyone can get the first level of meaning. It has to. Otherwise, no one will watch the movie. This movie doesn't make sense. The main character has to, I don't know, rescue the president's daughter from radioactive monkeys. But then he didn't. But then he got off on some tangent and he started an ice cream stand. Didn't make sense. This one will always make sense, I think. This takes some work to see. This one, even more so. So it's interesting to see as people develop in their learning and their study with Dr. Grimes, sometimes they became more open to the ideal or honorific. And towards the end of his life, he dropped. By the way, the one or the good, is the Greek actually oneself? He held on to that for many years, and then only when people were ready he dropped that. Which means there is a possible third way of reading it. So let's try all three. So that's just a bit of a background of how to approach the text and solve the puzzles. Or how to make a good movie, by the way, if you're a filmmaker. So, shortly afterwards, believe it to be false. We've already seen that, yes. You trust some particular argument. So let's use argument because logos is kind of less familiar in English, but let's try argument. The sick condition happens, the greatest defect of the soul, when you put your trust in some argument as being true without the use of the art of the logos, and then shortly afterwards believe it to be false. Believe the argument to be false. Yeah, it makes sense. Let's try it again. Put their trust in some argument as being true without the use of the art of the logos, then shortly afterwards believe the honorific arguments themselves to be false. Oh, there is no understanding. Understanding is just a tool for debate. There is no universal truth. It's all opinions. It's all relative to perspective. It's going to be hard to find truth if you're convinced that logos itself is not true. If there's only the realm of opinion. Let's try the ultimate. Let's risk it. Trust in some argument or logos as being true without the art of the logos, then shortly after believe the one self to be false. Ooh. Could that be the greatest stakes of the greatest defect? To believe there is no one self, there is no ultimate? In that top corner here, there is no ultimate, there is no destiny for humans, there is no purpose. It's whatever, life is whatever you want it to be, and if you want to get rich and screw over everybody, yay, capitalism. There's no problem with that. If you want to be a corrupt politician and exploit people, if you want to be a industrialist who destroys the earth's resources for personal profit, there is no actual purpose. It's whatever you want it to be. And therefore there is no quest of man. There is no philosophical quest. There is no oneself. Parmenides was a joker. Socrates was an idiot for following him. Not following him, but listening to him. Could this be the greatest stakes? Could all three? So you believe a particular, Socrates' argument about the soul being immortal. If you don't understand Socrates' particular argument with the art of the logos, you might be convinced that it's false. And now you're in fear of death. One of those great fears. Now you put the trust in the logos. Socrates' logos was being used when Socrates showed us that the soul is immortal. But now someone comes along and says, well, the soul is more like harmony of a guitar. That's the first thing to go. It's a byproduct of the physical world. come across some materialist. He says, oh, by the way, consciousness, mind, soul, that's just a byproduct of chemicals, of physical things. Just like the harmony of a guitar is a byproduct of the physical guitar. The physical guitar will last longer than the harmony. When you stop playing or when a string goes out of tune, you can't have the harmony, but you still have the physical guitar. The physical world is more real. When you die, you're worm food. You're physical. And somebody gives you that argument, not only will you believe the particular first level, argument that the soul, logos that the soul is immortal to be false, you might be convinced, well, there is no logos. If Socrates used the logos and now it feels like it's wrong, maybe logos itself is a joke. There's just theories, there's just scientific opinions. Uh-oh. Now the honorific. Socrates shows you that gives you an argument and you trust it, that the soul is immortal, but you haven't applied the art of the logos to understand whatever is involved in the logos, maybe understanding, maybe knowledge. You just trust it. And then somebody gives you that worm food argument, it kind of feels right. Not only do you believe the argument's wrong, particular, not only do you believe reasoning is wrong, honorific, self-logos and the honorific self, but maybe there's not even a self. There isn't a self. If the self-logos is the path leading us back to the one self, the ultimate, there's no ultimate, there's no destiny, there's no first cause, and also the final cause. Therefore, there's no meaning to life. There's no purpose. Wow. So by applying that understanding of the word altos, self, which we needed conditions, we needed this translation, which is only why it can only come to light now, why it's time for us to awaken philosophy. We have this translation, but also requires us to have done all this work, to be balloons, to be playing the game, to be matching him. We're an active participant.
You're a wizard, Harry.
We just like in the text, we have to match the hero level of Socrates. If those conditions are met, we can discover there is a puzzle here, a pattern tied to the word altos, and we unlocked a hidden meaning. So now, Socrates says this is the greatest defect. We could have just trusted him because it's Socrates. But now we have an understanding. So maybe what we just said, reading the text as it is, matching the level of mind of our author, engaging in the work itself, looking for the terms and the structures, doing dialectics ourselves, means we don't just have to trust him, we can see why it would be the greatest defect. You fear death now because the argument of the soul being immortal is no good to you. You don't even think there is a self-logo, so give up being a philosopher. And you don't even think there's a destiny or meaning of life. Nihilism, nothing. Or allow injustices, who cares? So, because we can see it for ourselves, because of the work we've done, when somebody comes along and says, you know what, you're just worm food, or you know what, there is no meaning of life, you know what, there is no universal understanding we can all share in to unite humanity under a common banner of excellence, and also discover a universal way of solving all human problems. There's nothing like that. Just allow tyranny and injustice and war to exist. Well, a lot of people think that way, but because we've seen it ourselves, we won't be persuaded by people who just contradict the logos. We've seen the stakes, particular, honorific, universal, self to be false. So maybe what we did is part of this mysterious art of the logos, because we don't just have trust, we have understanding that we had to develop ourselves. And one of the ways is seeing the significance of the word Altos. Let's keep reading. So good for us, by the way. And do we have some celebration? Let's do confetti. Confetti. And more confetti. Lots of confetti for us. Because that was pretty cool. So again, so we're adding to our question. What is this art of the logos? So, without the art of the logos and shortly believed self, 3 levels, to be false, by being so at times, but at other times not being so, sometimes it sounds like there is a logo, sometimes it seems to be wrong, and so on with another case. Even more so, with those who spend their whole time contradicting the logos, debaters, philosophy bros, or debate bros, red pillars, most mainstream people who call themselves philosophers on YouTube. What do? Contradict the logos. They just shoot things down. They don't do this work. And then they claim to be, and then, I'm so smart because I can just shoot holes in every argument. Yeah, 90% of people on YouTube speak that way. And mainstream media. So more so with those who spend their time contradicting the logos, that in the end they believe they have become most wise. Yeah, they do. And they alone have thoroughly understood. Yeah, I've figured it out. There isn't anything. Because look at how I can just shoot down every argument. Like that meme. Convince me otherwise. Are you actually interested in understanding, or are you just going to contradict everything and think that you're a cock of the walk? It's like that saying, don't play chess with a pigeon. He'll knock over all of the pieces, shit all over the board, and strut around like he won the game. That's why you don't play chess with a pigeon. Knocking over the pieces and shitting on the board, that's spending your whole time contradicting the logos, strutting around as though you won, thinking that you are the most wise, and you are the one who has thoroughly understood. And what have they understood? That there exists neither soundness or stability among the realities, nor the logos. So there's our 2. They think they're wise because they shut down this, and they shut down this. There's no reality, or if there is, it's not knowable. And there's no logos. There's no universal understanding and paradigm permeating reality. Even in music. Well, isn't there a pattern to how music works? Oh, no, that's just what sounds good. No, actually, there are patterns and relationships between the octave and the perfect fifth that also mirrors the geometrical movement of the planets, but also mirrors the certain patterns within the triad of the logos. No, there's not. What do you mean, no, there's not? Nah. Okay. You think you've won the game just by saying no? Anyway, so they shut down these 2. And they think that's what makes them clever. Wise and understanding. So there's no stability and soundness among the realities, nor the logos, but all that exists without any rules of art. Okay, there's a 3rd element. So there's our rules of art, and the word is techne. So there is no art of the logos, and there is no skillful use of it, and there is no structure that we can understand as the rules. So no reality, no logos, and no art. It's more like the tide of the European Straits, churning up and down, and no way resting at all. It's all just a big churning mess. Phaedo says, what you say is entirely true. Is it not also the case, Phaedo, that it would be a sad state of affairs if there was really a certain logos that is true and firm and capable of being understood? There's some positive for us. But that through their experience of having dealt with such logos, at one time were believed to be true, but then another time untrue. There's our kind of belief without the art of the logos. But they did not in any way blame themselves, nor their own lack of an art. In other words, not blame. It's realize the cause. So when there is actually a true and understandable, universal, true and firm logos. But when they believed it to be true and sometimes untrue, it's not because they lacked an art, but they're suffering, but because of the suffering that happened as a result of that, they gladly shift the cause away from themselves to the logos itself. It wasn't that I hadn't developed the art of the logos, so I was tricked or I didn't see things the way they are, or because I've got work to do. Because as we're saying, we're all some level of up that ladder and some level of the shadow, some level between the extremes. It's not because my needing to develop an art, I'm already, this is the thing, right? A lot of people want to feel like they always knew. So when you say, oh, you're wise, yeah, I'm the wise one, subscribe to my channel or buy my product or join my religion. When did you learn this? Often they'll say, I've always known. Yeah. People want to feel that their prejudices that they have a fierce loyalty to, evolutionarily speaking, inside cave good, that's always right. My dad was the best dad, he can beat up your dad. My mother's a saint. Everything they said was right. Makes things very easy. I mean, it causes all the problems, so it's not easy, but you don't have to do any work. You don't have to learn. And of course, not just their fault. There are certain conditions within our society that makes it difficult to have time to learn. Chasing that dollar, paying the rent, cost of living crisis, all that stuff. So it's not a blame game, but it's recognizing that, hey, it's not because there is no understanding that you are confused. It's because you have a lack of the art of the logos. But if you don't recognize that and you blame reason itself, then you'll spend the rest of their life hating and reviling the logos. Reasoning, understanding. Right, and that's very typical. Tyrants. Often the first people they go after are people they think of as intellectuals. People with prejudices. They burn the books. Fascists. Censor. Burn the books. Prevent access to information. Prevent learning. Why? They haven't realized that the injustices or the confusions they suffered they think it's kind of been my fault. It was unfair. Therefore, it's the fault of reasoning and thinking itself. In one sense, it is unfair. Yeah, we suffered an injustice. We all did suffer an injustice of some kind when we were young and we did not have the art of the logos. People who we were led to believe should be the most dear and trustworthy, our family and our parents or parental figures, related to us in a way that wasn't true, and we walked away with a belief about ourselves that it was. And when you realize that, we have to make sure we don't think, oh, that's because life is bad. Life is crazy. It's just irrational. It's unfair. Socrates is saying we have to recognize it's because you hadn't learnt the art yet. Which means there is a logos and there is something you can learn. There is a way of addressing our past injustices and the limiting false beliefs that happened as a result of them. There is a way of solving problems. And as we saw, the particular problems, the universal problem, so solving all problems, all human problems, and the ideal, reach solving the ultimate problem of the oneself. So there's a way of solving individual problems, particular, human problems, the universal, or alien, all problems, balloons, and also solving the ultimate problem, the quest to know the self. So it's fantastic that there is an art of the logos. Purification from our problems, perfection towards the ideal. escaping the chains of fate, reaching our destiny. So if you don't have the other logos, you'll spend the rest of your life hating and reviling logos and thus being deprived of the truth of beings and knowledge. This is big. Part of what we're here for is to reach the truth of knowledge and beings. That's learning, by the way. Everything we learn is a remembering of that in some way. Even for us to have this conversation, we are using language, we're using the logos at some level. And we recognize that there is a universality for you to be able to listen to my words and recognize, oh, this is not just a nonsense. There's a truth and there's a structure. There are nouns and verbs and adjectives. There's a structure and terms. And when we can even point to concepts that I've never ever experienced in my physical senses. I've never experienced beauty itself. I've never experienced two itself. I've never experienced absolute equalness, but I can recognize it. Where did that come from? Remembering something of the truth of the beings and knowledge all learning is, and therefore our goal is to reach the truth of knowledge and being, noesis. And it's not our only goal. We also have the virtues. We also have the integration of that into our virtues through reaching it via logos and dianoia, phronesis. But this is key. So what's the stakes? If you don't realize that if you're not trusting arguments and reasoning with the use of the art of the logos, you can spend your lifetime hating and reviling the logos and not reaching the truth of knowledge and being. Just as someone who's let down by humans and didn't realize, oh, they should have used this art to judge trustworthiness of humans, might end up realizing hating and reviling humans. Become a arch villain. Pretty cool.
Wow.
Phaedo responds, yes, by Zeus, without a doubt. That condition, hating, reviling the logos, would be a pitiful state of affairs. Now then, we should first guard against this condition, and that we should not allow into our soul that dangerous conviction. It's a conviction. Let's highlight that. So we have to be on guard. Whoops. First of all, we have to be on guard. Why do I keep yellow? We have to be on guard. And it's so that condition, that terrible condition, is a conviction. We talk about there being a fierce loyalty to our false beliefs, which is why we need to use the art of the logos in judging how we communicate what we've understood. Talked about even Dr. Pierre Grimes sharing this idea of the honorific reading of the word altos. Even that triggered people based on where they were at. So it's a dangerous conviction that there is nothing sound in the logos. We should not allow into our soul the dangerous conviction that there is nothing sound in the logos, but much rather that it is us who are in no way maintained in a sound way. That we must bravely, there's our idea of courage, bravely and eagerly pursue and be maintained in a sound way. So there's our bravery, eagerly pursue. There's our desire. That sounds like the virtue of courage and temperance, maybe. Keeping it makes it a virtue. So what do we have to do? We have to bravely and eagerly pursue being maintained in a sound way. How do we do that? Is our question. Therefore, on the one hand, for you and the others, for the sake of all the life still to come. He's got to like help them when he's gone. And I, on the other hand, for the sake of the death of self, he's dying today. In the present condition, run the risk of not maintaining a philosophical attitude about the self. So this is what we bravely, eagerly pursue and maintain, a philosophical attitude about the self. But just as those who are quite unenlightened have a contentious attitude, right? Those who, people who contradict the logos and have a conviction and they want to fight all the time, they have a contentious attitude. Now, we recognize Philomathesis, lover of learning, Philosophia, lover of wisdom, and Philophronesis, lover of the virtue phronesis, the eternal one, or the highest one. Philo. Now, I recognize contentious attitude, philo. So here's a different kind of love. Philo what? Let's highlight philo, and let's unpack what contentious attitude is in the Greek. So we're not just trusting the logos of our author, we are applying our own understanding, and that might be tied to the art of the logos, maybe. So let's do it. Hypothesis, by the way, goes in our hypothesis sack that we carry. So lover of what? What's this word here? So let's bring up the internet. Notice we have to go into space because the internet is not, so our background is in space, that's where the internet lives. Whoops, I have to go from there to there. There we go. So, I have to translate it from our ancient text into Greek. That's what this website does. Whoops. Okay, this was the TV Twitch posted that earlier and I copied it, so I need to copy. It was a defunct emoji. So we want this word, convert it to Greek, copy that, jump into Google to hear what it sounds like. Neikos. Neikos. What does neikos mean? Use our dictionary. No information for neikos. Okay. So we try Wiktionary. Oh my goodness. So now we look for a similar one. Here we go. Neikos. Right, so often the eye has like a one of those little squiggles. So that isn't maintained in our copying and pasting and translating. So we can take this back with us here. Neikos means to attack, start vehemently. To attack, bad, grim, vehement. A vehement attack. Strife of words, abusing, taunting, reproaching. Strife, battle, fight, quarreling. Right, so I think quarreling is a pretty good one. Fighting, battling. And nothing here. Takes a while. That one also causes lag, so a lover of quarreling, battling, fighting, attacking. So a contentious attitude is a lover of attacking, attack, quarrel, fight. So We have to bravely and eagerly pursue and maintain a philosophical attitude about this self. About self. So here's the word, about self. So we see altos there. So of course, 3 levels. Maintain a philosophical attitude about the particular. What's the particular? The logos. The honorific, being. Maintain a philosophical attitude about being. Why? Because if you hate the logos, you'll be deprived of truth and being. So maintain a philosophical attitude about the particular logos, the particular of the argument. The honorific, logos hasn't one of the aspects of being is logos. So maintain a philosophical attitude about being. Don't be convinced that there is no soundness or stability among the realities. That there's only the physical world. All right. And then the ultimate, the self. Don't be convinced that there is no self. That you should be selfless and reject the self to be a slave. That seeking your self goals is bad because we use the word selfish. That there is no eternal watcher in the many ups and downs that your physical body and your other experiences have. So maintain a philosophical attitude about all 3. Those who are unenlightened have a lover of quarreling and fighting. For the unenlightened, when they also engage in argument about anything, on the one hand, they will in no way care whether or not the logos under discussion maintains any phronesis. This is one of our big things. He says, he's been saying all the way through the text, what does a philosopher love? The truth of beings and knowledge, that's one. And here's the other thing he's been saying. Phronesis. Tying the logos and being to our virtues. The currency, that for the sake of which we've been developing the logos. So he says, hey, it's the truth of knowledge and being, is that for the sake of which, let's for the sake. Oh no. Here we go. The right exchange for all of our virtues, 69b. The only valid currency that you exchange the virtues for is mindfulness. So that's the sake for which, and by the way, when you do that, it's a rite of initiation. Being, virility, sound-mindedness, and justice, the 4 virtues, wisdom, courage, sound-mindedness, and justice becomes justice, courage, phronesis, and sound-mindedness. That's the rite of initiation. If you don't have this and you're uninitiated, you will, when you reach Hades, the next life, you will lie out in the mud. You have to be purified and perfected. That's what is a true mystic. Many are the staff bearers, few are the inspired mystics. Those are the ones who have practiced philosophy correctly. So phronesis is necessary to be a mystic. Phronesis is necessary to have with you in the afterlife, so you're not in the mud when you get there. Phronesis is a rite of initiation, and it's that for the sake of which you're developing the virtues. Now, also, that for the sake of which, so we've got 2 things, the sake of which we have the virtues, and here he says, accordingly, so we want to, this is 83e, we want to enter Hades, the realm of being, in a pure way, so we can't nail ourselves to the body. Nailing the soul to the body is when we pursue when we think that our pleasures or pains are most clear and real. That makes the soul bound to the body. So he's not saying don't have pleasures and pains. He's got a kid, so he's had sex. even now he's got a young kid. But to don't think it's most clear and real. That's what makes the soul bound to the body, nails her to the body. We want to be, naturalized into it as a seed. So the word naturalized here is rooted. You're rooting the soul to the body. That's going to affect you negatively and your reincarnations negatively, just as you're rooting a seed in the ground. So we want to instead, if we don't do that, we can purify ourselves so that we can purify ourselves from attachment to the body as most clear and real, so that we can be in communion with the divine company and of the pure and uniform. So communion is not the word, that's to be joining with the God. The God. So we want to join with the God and of the pure and uniform. It's for the sake of these beings that we love learning and have. So orderly and virile is the adjective related to sound-mindedness or temperance and courage. So what are we doing? We're loving learning and we're developing the virtues, following the logos. So the soul of a courageous philosopher must follow the logos, and do not imprison yourself by getting wrapped up in the physical senses. So, for the sake of the virtues, we want phronesis. For the sake of loving learning and the virtues, loving learning in a virtuous way, in a just way. So there's three virtues there. Learning, orderly, virile, and just. That's learning, which becomes wisdom. Orderly is temperance or sound-mindedness. Virile is courage, and just is, of course, justice. And we can see dikaios. Dikaios is the Greek word for justice. That's pretty funny.
What in the heck are we talking about here?
Dikaios is justice.
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
But it's funny. This is a way of remembering it, so we can see it in Greek. So, for the sake of which, those are the two things. And of course, earlier he says, he ties self-mindfulness. Here we go. The soul wants to reach truth and mindfulness. So those two are tied. So just a bit of quick recap. Those two have been tied all the way through. Phronesis and truth of being. If we hate the logos, we'll be deprived of being. But also here he's hit the second part, mindfulness. So we need to maintain a philosophical attitude about self, logos, being, and oneself. Those who are unenlightened have a contentious attitude. For the unenlightened also engage in argument about anything. Yeah. Debate bros, that's what makes me smart. Like pretty much all pundits, all mainstream media, all popular YouTube channels. They have an opinion about anything. And they're just contradicting in a kind of a hateful way. It's appealing. It's common in our society. We need to awaken phronesis. They argue about anything and will in no way care whether or not the logos under discussion maintains any phronesis. So the logos can maintain phronesis. That's interesting. So what we direct the logos to, if we have phronesis, we can use it as a kind of barometer. When I talk about Tom Cruise, does it maintain my one virtue or ultimate virtue of phronesis? Oh, it doesn't. So maybe I shouldn't be interested in that. If I've been developing the virtues, temperance, desiring the logos about being, courage, holding the truth about the logos of being in the ups and downs, pleasures and pains, fears and desires. Wisdom, learning about the logos of being and using it in my planning. And justice, using it in all functioning. And if I've actually had an encounter of being, and wisdom is upgraded to phronesis, can I use phronesis as a kind of metric or barometer to see whether or not the logos under discussion maintains it, or whether or not I shouldn't be talking about it? So let's copy this and break this word down. So I've just looked up this word. We have the first part of the word is phronesis, and the last part is ousin. Phronos, phronesis, of course, and ousia. So ousia is the nature of being. So maybe you could read this as they don't know whether or not the logos maintains true ousia, or ousia also means self-reflection. So the phronesis virtue applied to self-reflection, or the virtue of phronesis applied to being, or true phronesis, because being is also true. So as a puzzle, if you're a Greek scholar or you know one, so this is the tricky thing. You can't just be a Greek scholar. You have to also know what ousia is, and you have to know what phronesis is. And knowing what phronesis is a puzzle that we don't even know yet. We know it's significant because a philosopher seeks truth and phronesis. And it's the currency that we trade our virtues in for. And it's a rite of initiation, and we need it before we reach Hades. But also ousia is being. So it's curious, because if we're interested in ousia, or the truth of being, and phronesis, this kind of word, phronose, how do we pronounce it? Phrotezouzin. It's kind of a combination of the two of them, being and phronesis. So those who are a lover of fighting, alpha bros and people who claim to be smart, or you know the type, I'm smarter and cleverer because I fight everyone. They do not know whether the logos under discussion maintains phronesis and ousia. But on the other hand, they are only eager that those present believe this which selves has set forth. Huh? Okay, that doesn't make sense. And it seems to me that in my present condition, I differ from them only to their... Okay, so this is significant. This is the only way in which Socrates differs from these people who love to fight and argue and debate, bros. I differ them only in this extent, for I shall not in any way be eager for those present to believe that what I say is true, except if it were secondary. But I shall only be eager that myself thoroughly believes that anything I say has to be. Okay, this seems to be a big point. So we're going to read this, and we're going to read it in two other translations just to make sure it's our own. So, the unenlightened engage in argument about anything. They don't care whether or not the logos under discussion maintains any phronesis and phronesis ousia. But on the other hand, they're only eager to those that those present believe that which they have set forth. Okay, we got it. They want to be believed. Of course, if there's no actual truth, ousia, and there's no actual integration and apprehension of that eternally, phronesis, then what makes something true? That which is commonly believed, isn't that democracy? They want to be believed. That what they have set forth. And it seems to me that in my present condition, I differ only from them to this extent. I shall not in any way be eager for those present to believe me, that what I say is true, except if it was secondary, that I shall only be eager that myself thoroughly believes anything believes that anything I say has to be in this way. For behold in what a selfish way I use the logos. Okay, that's a puzzle. Is it actually selfish, or is that a... Okay, I've been making a big point of pointing out that the word selfish is a terrible language of slavery. That it's somehow bad to pursue your own goals. That's absurd, because the greater we are, the more full we are, the more we are able to help others, and we all want to help others. It's one of our human needs. The greater our light is, the greater we illuminate others. Another way of saying that. So I want to nail down what this word means here. All right, this word here, pelenetikos, is greedy. So we don't have to use the word selfish, of course, which is good. So he's greedy. It's not bad to be greedy. Behold in what a greedy way I use the logos, my dear companion. For if what I say hits upon being true, surely then it has to persuade in a beautiful way. So, true has to persuade, and it has to do so in a beautiful way. This is one of our earlier questions. What should change our mind? What should we find persuasive? It's not that what people believe, that shouldn't be your metric for truth. What should, though? If nothing exists after death, well then indeed for this time even less, thou shalt be inclined to distress those present with lamentations before death. Since neither will my ignorance continue to exist with self, for that would be wrong, since it will come to an end a little after. Saying, oh, even if our soul didn't exist after death, that would mean I'd be fury of my ignorance. Here I am, thus prepared, O Simius and Cebes. I come to advocate for the logos. Interesting. So this is the hero's battle cry. So then if you will be persuaded by me, you will give but little thought to the person of Socrates. Oh, this is key. He always does this. Give little thought to the person of Socrates. Notice this is the opposite to what debate bros do. Oh, you're wrong because I'm going to attack your character. Or I'm right because of how cool and muscly I am, or how rich I am. This is often a standard. Or the Constitution is right because of the people who wrote it, the founding fathers. People who lack the understanding of the logos really struggle to find some paradigm to make things true. It usually becomes the person. Is it the founding fathers? Is it something Jesus said? Is it something Moses said? Are they rich? So people like Trump. What else do we have as a metric for truth? Has to be the person. Wrong question. This is the significance for philosophy to be awoken. Gives us a paradigm for understanding, for truth. Give little thought to the person of Socrates, but much more to the truth. If on the one hand, I should stop saying it again. If you believe that what I say is true, agree with me. But if you do not, oppose it with every logos in order that in my eagerness I do not thoroughly beguile myself and also yourself at the same time. And just like a bee leave behind my sting when I go. So here he is talking about this idea that we've been mentioning, that a true hero has to pass on his quirk, has to pass on his teaching when he goes. And here he is putting a metaphor on that. I don't want to like a bee, because when a bee dies, like a bee stings you and then breaks off and he dies. But he leaves his sting when he goes, still hurting you. Make sure that what I pass on isn't a bad sting, a bee sting. So don't worry about me as a person. Agree if it's true, but if you do not, oppose it, please. Use the logos too. Don't attack me as a person, of course. Use the logos. Then we must go on. First, I do not appear to remember. Remind me of what you said. For Simmias, on the one hand, I believe, distrusts and fears that even though the soul is more divine and beautiful than the body, she may perish by a being of such a nature as you see in harmony. Whereas Cebes, I think, agrees with me in this, that on the one hand, the soul is much more longer lasting than the body, but that this is altogether unknown whether or not the soul really wears out many bodies. And then upon leaving her last body, the last coat you're wearing, at that time, self is destroyed. It is destroyed. The honorific of the soul is destroyed. The one soul. The one self is destroyed. See the three layers? It, honorific, one self. And that's ways of unlock deeper readings in the text, but we can keep it on it for a while. And upon leaving the last body, the soul is destroyed, and this is her self-death. The total destruction of soul. Since the body is always being destroyed, for its destruction does not ever end. Is it these issues or others, Simmias and Cebes, that we must necessarily investigate? Phaedo says they both agree that it was really was these. Socrates continues, do you then not accept all our previous statement? Or some and not others? Again, where you at, where you stuck. Important to realize where someone is at to begin the conversation. Now, where are you at? Is this your argument? Yes. Where are you stuck? Which arguments do you not follow? Some, they both said, but not others. So they're stuck on some, but not others. So he nailed where they're at, their reasoning, and where they're stuck, he has to nail that down. The two questions you can ask somebody. I guess you could ask a third, if you can find something that relates to both, where you're at and where you're stuck. What have your dreams been like? So that gives you information of both. What's your mythology? Like, what art have you made? So you can reflect where you're at and where you're stuck. It's the mean. What then about the logos in which we said that learning is recollection, and that if this logos has to be in this way, our souls must necessarily previously exist elsewhere before being imprisoned in the body? So he's really hammering home this idea of imprisonment. Self-imprisonment is to do with the body. To do with chasing our pleasures and pains and thinking they're most clear and real. But he's saying just being in a body is a kind of imprisonment. He's in prison right now. So myth, we just said myth can represent both. The myth, he's in prison literally. He's literally chained. So what about the logos that learning is recollecting? And then our soul has to have existed somewhere to have known that which we're recalling before being imprisoned in a body. CB says, I was at that time wonderfully convinced by self. And now again I stand by self, as I would by no other logos. Simeon says, And I certainly have to believe self is in this way also. And I would be very surprised if I indeed ever believed about this in any other way. Socrates says, but you must necessarily change your opinion, O Theban guest. If you still maintain the belief that harmony is the composite element. Composite. Remember, he's putting the argument that the soul can't dissipate because it's not composite, it's not made up of many things. It's more like being, uniform, single. But you believe, Simius, O Theban guest, whatever that means, that, I mean, I don't know the significance of that. So it's a question, goes in my sack. That harmony is a composite element, while on the other hand, you say that soul is a kind of harmony composed of physical elements, being in a state of tension. Very familiar to our world, right? There's no soul. Our consciousness is a byproduct of physical, the brain, chemicals. For certainly you will indeed not allow yourself to maintain that prior to a composite harmony existing, those elements existed even before that, out of which self must have necessarily been composed. Or would you allow this? Now, prior to the composite harmony, those elements existed before that, out of which you have been composed. Okay, so now he's getting into the nitty-gritty of the arguments. He's breaking it down. He's becoming an advocate of the logos. And of course, he's giving us the negative. He doesn't want to leave behind a sting when he goes, meaning he's doing that thing that we said he is setting himself out to do. Not just define and demonstrate, define the truth and demonstrate it in a dialectic with our friends, but give us some sort of puzzles so we can engage in a dialectic with him. We can do some work, we can solve some puzzles. And so he's doing that. One way he's doing that is he's giving us the negatives. He's saying, hey, I'm not the sort of person who is interested in just people believing me like scammers are, grifters are, those who contradict the logos and act like they're cock of the walk, that they have wisdom. In fact, I want to see for myself. Now, a lot of scammers and con artists and grifters and right-wingers and all these people, they don't believe their crap. A lot of evangelists, like billionaires, they don't believe their crap. They just want others to believe them. Socrates is saying that's what makes me different. Persuading others is secondary. The greedy way I use the logos is for that myself thoroughly believes anything I say has to be. But if I hit upon the truth, then it should persuade. It has to persuade in a beautiful way. So by the way, if our soul dissipates when we die, what would you be worried about? You'd lose your ignorance. So why would you care? Which is interesting because he didn't say, oh, we lose our fear. The fear of death. Oh, but when you die, you won't have a fear of death, so who cares? Which is a common atheist argument. He says, my ignorance is gone. So while he's saying, well, maybe the soul, like in his hypothetical, even if he thought the soul doesn't die, he's not saying the self doesn't die. Sorry, even if the soul expires after we wear out this coat, our soul doesn't maintain after our physical death. He's not saying the self dies. He doesn't go that far. It's irrational. For him, it's irrational to suggest there is no self. My ignorance will not continue along with self. So the self will continue. He may not have a soul, but he will still be self. So there is no fear of losing self. That it doesn't make sense. So Socrates must have a profound understanding about the self to realize it can't not exist. So even if the soul dies, he's going to lose his ignorance. So the soul is some sort of, in this argument, it's some sort of accruement or development of our learning and our ignorance. Where you at and where you're stuck. And he talks about our incarnations and based on how we nurture the soul in this lifetime. In what way do we nail our soul to our body to become attached to the physical world and therefore reincarnate? We want to purify ourselves from our ignorance and perfect ourselves in our understanding. By the way, if our soul dies, then we'd lose that ignorance that we've been here to purify. So that's a good thing. So why would I lament that? Why would I be distressed if the soul dies? Because I'm still going to have self. I'm just not going to have that ignorance that I'm carrying with me into my next lifetime. So that's not an issue. But I don't even think the soul dies. I'm going to become an advocate for the logos that the soul has to exist beforehand and after. So that's a curious way of looking at the fear of death. Yeah, if you can't not have self, everything is in self, of self, returning to self. That can't be so, because then there'd be nothing. The question is whether or not your soul continues. And is your personality a culmination of your ignorance? In which case, you should kind of want your soul to dissipate. Unless, of course, there is some significance of not just removing your ignorance with death, but through a learning of the logos. There might be some significance to having to remove our ignorance or purify in honor of the god of Apollo, the god of philosophy, through philosophy. There might be some significance of returning to the self, having removed your ignorance through philosophy. So that seems to be the way of framing it. You can't not have self. The question is the culmination of your ignorance that you're here to address. Say, hey, I wouldn't be distressed or lament the destruction of the soul, because that means I've removed my ignorance. Great. But I think we're actually here to remove the ignorance through our logos, through philosophy. There might be a significance to that. And that's why I'm an advocate for the logos. So, interesting framing. Never thought about it in that way. Makes sense though, especially if you're familiar with the self, as we've been doing today, Altos, seeing how it's related to the ultimate realm, the ultimate excellence, ultimate, the first and final cause. We talked about that already today. So ignorance has been the theme, purifying ourselves from ignorance. So, he's giving us the negative. He's saying, hey, side B of the dialectic of philosophy is what? Someone who loves fighting. What do they want? To convince others to believe. So we have to fill in the gaps. He's doing it. He's helping us pick it up, and he's giving us material for us to understand. So we're not a lover of fighting. We don't want to persuade others. In fact, he said, hey, I want to convince myself. And if it's the truth, it should itself be persuasive and in a beautiful way. So there's an element of trust in the logos, if what I hit on is true. Now, he's saying, hey, don't care about me. Give little thought to the person of Socrates. Focus on the truth. Now that's interesting because he's saying, hey, if my soul were to die, my personality, my psyche were to die with my body, I'd still have self. By the way, he's saying he's completed his work. He's not going to reincarnate. He's going to the higher level of evolution. So when he says give little thought to the person of Socrates and instead focus on the truth, not only does that apply to the argument, it may apply to Socrates' way of relating to himself. The soul, which is kind of a culmination of ignorance that makes him think that he is an individual Socrates, that's not his focus. He's going to being to the truth. So hey, give little thought to the person of Socrates not only is going to help us in the argument, but is his level of seeing maybe. I'm not Socrates. That's a culmination of my soul's ignorance that I've seen through now. He's already mentioned there's a hyparxis of soul. That which is beyond personalities. Whereas people interested in belief and contention are all about personalities, all about their image. Curious, right? So, and he's saying, oh, by the way, giving us work to do. I don't want to leave behind a sting when I go. So we have to do the work. What's the opposite? What's the positive? I want to leave behind a gift. What's the opposite of a sting? In other words, I'm going to leave behind what's the ultimate gift? The art of the logos. That's the necessary gift. So he's saying, well, not saying it, he's giving it to us to figure out. Make sure you speak up. And if something does not seem to be the truth, you oppose it with every logos. So that I can pass on the gift of the art of the logos. So he's talking to us. Match me. So that I can pass on not a bee sting after I'm dead, but the art of the logos when I'm dead. And my goal isn't to persuade you because I'm trying to convince you like these people who love to argue. I'm using phronesis and being as my metric to say whether or not the logos is worth talking about. The persuasiveness has to be a secondary byproduct of it being true. It will persuade in a beautiful way. And we can see why, because truth is being, which is the hyparxis or the pyramid, top of the pyramid of beauty itself, of logos itself, of justice, ordered, perfect ordering itself. So it will have beauty as a characteristic if it's the truth. It will be persuasive as the characteristic of the logos. It will be necessarily so as the characteristic of justice. So persuasiveness is not my goal, it's secondary. Curious. So we can learn. If we want to match Socrates, that should be our goal. We're not learning this so we can become better debaters, which is often the way philosophy is taught. Psychology is taught. Can you be persuasive? Can you make a good argument as to why your idea of psychology is worth doing? Can you make a good argument as to why your personal philosophy could be legitimate? Hegel's argument or Kant's argument or empiricist nominalism, all these crazy words that talk about personal opinions. There is no metric of truth at university, I don't think. They don't have the logos yet, for good reason. It's not a blame game. We have to awaken it. And therefore, what's the metric? Persuasiveness. Can you present yourself personally as someone who seems to be a knower or can persuade others? Can you sell a course? We don't do that here. If we're going to match Socrates, we want to do the opposite. We want to persuade ourselves because we've hit on truth. And the persuasiveness has to be a natural byproduct of it being true. It's It's nothing to do with us. It's not to do with our personality. It's just truth. Which means awakening philosophy in this way has the potential to unify all of mankind. There's no differences anymore. It's just the truth. It's going to be persuasive to anybody who wants to follow the Logos. That's the nature of understanding. This is why it can solve all human problems. Unify us as a race. It's not about the person. It's about the truth. How do we get there? Be an advocate for the Logos. So, clarifying the stakes. Saying, hey, by the way, this is the one sort of person who claims to be a knower. This is the true knower. And it's not about individuals. It's not about convincing people. It's not about belief. Therefore, we fill in the opposite. If it's not about those things, what is it about? So he's giving us to do. Well, what it is about, not personalities. It's about truth, universality. It can unite humanity. It can unite all in understanding. It can be naturally persuasive as a byproduct of it being true. So any human being can follow this. Any human being can develop the art of the Logos. It has the potential to unite all human beings, save us from the division that happens from people who have a love of contention, which is just what happens if you're not a philosopher. It's a byproduct of not being a philosopher, not having maintaining bravely and eagerly pursuing and maintaining a philosophical attitude about self. If you're not doing that, you will end up having a love of contention, fighting, convincing. Therefore, he's upping the stakes again. This is what we need to unite humanity. This is what we need to transcend individual particulars to reach truth. It will naturally be persuasive, so we don't have to force anyone. We don't have to put someone in prison or kill them or genocide them if they don't believe us. It has to be naturally persuasive. It can transcend all war, conflict, violence, and punishment. It's not about individuals, so it can transcend all individual identity. It can raise us to the level of, through the Logos, level of being. Ousia and phronesis. It can not only unite humanity, not only transcend all problems, wars, and violence, but it can perfect humanity in phronesis and ousia, reaching truth and being and integrating it into the highest virtue. This is the opposite of the bee sting. This would be the work of the true hero, the ultimate hero, the highest hero. To pass on a tradition, pass on a way of being. Phronesis ousia. Phronesis ousia is another way of saying phronesis being. To pass on phronesis being, the ultimate, eternal, universal virtue being, that way of being. Socrates is saying, hey, if I'm going to be the ultimate hero in my swan song, I have to pass on the ultimate virtue way of being, phronesis being. And it has to be persuasive as a secondary byproduct of it being true. Because I want to reach truth. First of all. That is the greatest thing I can pass on. That is the greatest thing that anybody could pass on. The highest virtue way of being that can transcend, solve all problems, transcend all division and conflict, purify humanity, and perfect us in our evolution. That's the stakes he's setting for himself. And he's calling that the art of the Logos. And he's providing it in a way where he's not giving us the answers, giving us the material to see it ourselves. That's how he's going to pass it on. Wow. Can he do it? Can he reach this ultimate standard of excellence and heroic behavior? On that bombshell and on that teaser, on that cliffhanger, I hope to see you next time. I hope this has enticed you to join me next time. Thank you for joining me. If you want to support the channel, you can join us on Twitch in real time. You can like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can share your own ways of being to match Socrates yourself, to engage in the activity on Discord. And you can support the channel on Patreon if you want to do that, and you're able to do that too. Thank you so much. I hope you feel like you are becoming an ideal hero yourself. And if you are, some clapping. I hope to see you next time.